In this box, there's a brand new laptop, and it's not just any laptop. You could easily say it's really top-notch equipment. It's not only beautiful, thin, and powerful, but it also has one of the most stunning 120 Hz, and let me emphasize, organic light-emitting diode screens. So you might ask, where's the challenge? Well, this model isn't based on an advanced micro devices or Intel processor, but inside you'll find a Snapdragon X Elite. Snapdragon? That name probably sounds familiar, right? After all, it's a family of processors that for many years has been considered the best and most recommended processors in smartphones. A smartphone with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 3rd generation processor takes first place in the Antutu ranking. This benchmark also evaluates artificial intelligence performance, awarding points based on the ability to classify images and detect objects in space. Qualcomm's Snapdragon processors dominate the top 13 positions in the ranking, making them unmatched in this regard. Only from the 14th place do we find the strongest processors from the competition, which are the Dimensity 9300 and 9300 Plus. But in terms of artificial intelligence computing power, they are 7 times weaker than the aforementioned Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. However, the latest and super energy-efficient laptops have received a different processor, the Snapdragon X Elite, which is an even more powerful chip, yet it consumes 68% less energy than the processors used so far. Honestly, this makes a significant difference in a laptop. So, is this already the end of the x86 era? And should we avoid buying devices with advanced micro devices or Intel inside? After all, laptops with Snapdragon are not only super efficient, but they can even last up to 20 hours on a single battery charge. But how does Snapdragon work with Windows? Will there be any problems? And if so, what kind? This is Powell, and you're watching the TechManiac HD channel. I invite you to this really interesting video. The x86 architecture, which Intel and advanced micro devices processors are based on, is a technology that dates back to the 1970s. Back then, it was a breakthrough, but since then, more than 50 years have passed. Unfortunately, x86 is outdated and very inefficient, at least compared to the Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine Architecture, or Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine. Intel attempted to enter the smartphone processor market, but failed miserably. It's true that Atom consumed less energy than other Intel processors, but in terms of performance and efficiency, the Blue Team's products couldn't even come close to Qualcomm processors. After all, nobody would want a phone that needs to be charged every few hours or so, even when it's just lying there on standby with the screen off. After the massive failure, Intel abandoned efforts to compete in the smartphone and tablet market. And so, for many years, the Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine Architecture dominated the handheld market. And although there was an appetite to switch laptops to the Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine Architecture as well, that step was never taken. Well, the biggest problem was the operating system. After all, Windows was written for the x86 architecture, and secondly, Qualcomm was busy designing ultra-small and energy-efficient processors. But that was back then. Today we see that new smartphones have 12 or even 16 gigabytes of RAM, and their performance, at least compared to older, several-year-old laptops, is usually much higher. The Snapdragon S1 was released in 2009, followed by the S2 a year later, which was 1.5 times faster. The S3's efficiency and performance improved consistently each year compared to previous models. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but this constant progress has brought us to the point where we are now. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 is many times faster than its younger sibling. It's no wonder that Microsoft started working on this early, and in 2012 Windows RT was released. However, it was a modified version of Windows 8 and did not have a backward compatibility layer. As a result, it could only run programs built for Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine, and there were practically none of those. In 2017, Microsoft released Windows 10 for the Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine Architecture, and that was a huge breakthrough. It allowed for the emulation of programs written for x86. You could say it's like on-the-fly translation of a program from x86 to Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine Architecture and back, so the biggest problem was solved. After all, now everything started to work. Well, almost everything. However, emulation means a lot of extra calculations for the processor, and almost 8 years ago, working comfortably on such a device was really far from ideal. This greatly motivated Microsoft and Qualcomm to accelerate the technology's development. Snapdragons kept breaking new records in performance and energy efficiency, and in 2021, Windows 11 for Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine was released, which, attention, finally got improved x86 emulation. We're talking about Windows Prism. Thanks to being optimized for the new processors, it offers significantly better performance compared to previous emulation technologies. Although Prism already allows you to run most x86 applications, emulation is still emulation, and that still comes with some performance loss. And that's why in the new laptops we have the Snapdragon X Elite, which is even twice as powerful as the top mobile Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Where did I even get this computer from? Well, Computronics Store asked me to check how a laptop with a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor would perform in everyday use, and for the tests, they let me choose any device available on their website. Of course, I'll have to return it, but the plan is that both you and I will learn something new, so give a thumbs up and let's thank Computronic for this opportunity. So I went into the all laptops category. From the long list, I chose the ones with a Snapdragon processor, and since I can pick whatever I want, I sorted the list by price. I see some crazy designs here for 11,000, for 9, but honestly, maybe it's better to check out something that's the cheapest. Okay, the cheapest one is the Surface Pro tablet, but for just 100 more, we have the Vivobook S15 with a 15.6-inch organic light-emitting diode screen. And what I like is that it has a dedicated numeric keypad. Oh, I couldn't wait for this laptop. I've heard a lot about these designs, but now I finally have a chance to test a Snapdragon with Windows for myself. And here it is, the silver version. Inside there's some paperwork, a compact 90-watt USB-C charger. On the lid there's a sticker that says your first ASUS Copilot Plus PC and a new era of artificial intelligence begins. Oh, you can tell that the marketing people will stick their hands everywhere, although this sticker reveals that the computer meets the artificial intelligence requirements introduced in June 2024. At this point, you likely know about Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer Copilot is an intelligent assistant from Microsoft. The right control button has been replaced with the Copilot button. Just like some of you, at first I thought this move was quite bold. But searching for certain information and getting to the right one can be very time-consuming. Asking Copilot directly and getting a specific answer is extremely convenient, and having a dedicated button made me start using it even more willingly. It's just nice to have an assistant who has an answer for everything. Just don't forget that artificial intelligence is still prone to various strange hallucinations, and we should verify the accuracy of the information. To apply for the Copilot Plus PC branding, you need to meet several conditions, but the most important one is the processor. It must have a built-in neural processing unit, or neural processing unit for short. Moreover, it must have a performance of at least 40 trillion operations per second. And indeed, if we right-click on the taskbar and open the Task Manager, we'll see that besides the central processing unit, we also have a neural processing unit processor here, and it's used specifically for local artificial intelligence processing. In the current version of Windows, it can recognize images, voices, or perform real-time translations, and it does this more efficiently than regular computing units. And since we're here, let's talk about the rest of the specifications. You already know very well that the Snapdragon X Elite is inside, but not everyone realizes that there are 4 versions of this processor. All of them have 12 cores, but they differ in clock speed and the computing power of the graphics unit. This model has the 7800 version, which is the most energy efficient one. The graphics are rendered by the Adreno unit with a power of 3.8 teraflops. The Vivobook S15 is available with 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM. From what I can see, Computronic sent me the more expensive version, but honestly, that doesn't really change anything for us. They also put in a 1TB Micron 2400 drive here. Well, it's not a high-performance drive, but 4800 megabytes per second read and 3300 write is more than enough for everything we need. And all of this is enclosed in a sleek-looking silver case. On the right side, there are indicator LEDs and 2 5GB USB-A ports. On the left side, you'll find an HDMI output, 2 USB-C ports supporting power delivery with DisplayPort Alt mode, which means charging and video output. Behind them, there's a microSD card reader and a mini jack combo for headphones and a microphone. This model is not only very lightweight, but it's also very thin. It's commonly believed that only thicker devices can provide sufficient cooling for all the internal components. And yes, this theory was absolutely true for many years, but as I mentioned, Intel or advanced micro devices processors are based on the x86 architecture, which is less efficient compared to advanced reduced instruction set computer machine. As a result, during calculations it generates more heat loss, heat that eventually needs to be dissipated somehow. Here we can see that during normal browsing, the processor temperature hovers around 35 degrees Celsius, and that's with the fans completely inactive. The NVMe drive is at 27 degrees, and no matter where you touch it, the device is cold, unless we warm up the case with our wrists. Gaming on battery yields similar results. Yes, the fans finally start spinning, but so quietly that you can't hear them at all from 30 centimeters away. If you put the back of the device to your ear, you can hear something and feel a warm breeze. But what do we see? Just under 61 degrees. It's simply amazing. But please notice that the graphics system may be fully loaded, but 4 out of 12 processor cores remain inactive. Not that they're really needed for the game right now, but that definitely affects the low amount of heat being generated. Only after connecting an external power source do all 12 Orion cores come to life, motivating the fans to work at a finally audible level. By no means would I say it's loud, but at least we can finally hear that they're actually there for a reason. With the fans running, the temperature stabilized at around 70 degrees and the upper part of the keyboard started to get just a bit warmer. Although I should point out that the fan was set to the standard mode. If we want, we can set it to performance mode or full speed. Alternatively, if we prefer silence even while gaming, we can turn on whisper mode. I'm starting to understand where all the excitement about Qualcomm processors comes from. Well, the device is thin, lightweight, and even if we put a heavy load on the processor and graphics chip, it still maintains an incredibly high level of performance. In other words, compared to equally thin advanced micro devices or Intel counterparts, this one doesn't sound like a hairdryer, at least not in the standard fan mode, and I can assure you in advance that this will be sufficient for most of you. If you're an architect or animator, while you can work on your projects here, you probably won't be rendering them on this machine. Dedicated workstations are designed for this purpose. This image shows a scene being rendered in Cinebench with fans in whisper mode. The central processing unit temperature is 64 degrees Celsius, but the clock speed on 12 cores is limited to 2.2 GHz. The standard mode is already audible, but still comfortable. The clock speed increases by half a gigahertz. The temperature is 75 degrees, but let's move on. Well, the performance mode adds another 300 MHz. The temperature is almost the same, but the fans are blowing much more strongly now. In my opinion, setting the fans to full speed doesn't make much sense anymore. Now you can hear the laptop even from the next room. The temperature is 86 degrees, but as you can see from the graph, the clocks only occasionally rise to 3.3 GHz. They drop for the first time, then the second time, and when the processor cools down, they rise again, and this cycle repeats. As for the build quality of the tested ASUS, you really can't say a bad word about it. Although this is practically the cheapest design with a Snapdragon on board, it doesn't mean that it's a weak, budget, or plastic laptop. Most of the casing is made of metal. Nothing bends here, nothing creaks or squeaks. The screen opens royally, meaning you can open it with one finger all the way up to 180 degrees. It's almost embarrassing that I'm only now talking about the screen, because this 120Hz bright, large organic light-emitting diode with a resolution of 2880 by 1620 pixels will blow anyone away. For now, you'll just have to take my word for it, but if you get this or a similar laptop in your hands, go to the display settings and activate the High Dynamic Range protocol. Then play any high dynamic range recorded content on YouTube. Remember to change the quality to 4K, press F, and enjoy the experience, something that can't really be described in words or, well, shown through this recorded video. The only thing I can do is show you in a single shot what organic light-emitting diode looks like on this laptop compared to a professional 32-inch 4K in-plane switching panel. On the organic light-emitting diode, the blacks are perfectly black and the colors are vivid. Watching high dynamic range movies on this laptop is a real feast for the eyes. I'll add that the panel brightness is currently set to half. A lot of good things can be said about OLEDs, but their weakness is that when displaying bright objects for a long time, they can suffer from what's called burn-in. However, there are proven mechanisms that significantly slow down this process. In this laptop, the pixel shift function is permanently enabled. By default, pixel refresh and the taskbar transparency effect are also enabled. Moreover, the brightness is adjusted automatically according to the surroundings. Thanks to Windows Hello, the device also has a presence detection feature. If we walk away or turn away from the screen, it will turn off and the system will be locked. If a stranger tries to unlock the computer, the system will ask them to enter a password. However, if we return to the laptop, Windows will recognize our face and unlock our account. The process may not be super fast, but it's still quicker than manually typing a password or even a personal identification number. But that's not the end of the cool features. This laptop also detects whether we're looking at the screen. If you're sitting in front of it, but your gaze is directed elsewhere, for example, when you're talking to someone or looking at the television, the screen dims. As soon as we look at it, it immediately brightens up. This not only greatly reduces power use and prolongs operation time, but more importantly is made to increase the organic light-emitting diode panel's lifespan. It's just a pity that this screen isn't touch-sensitive and there are quite a lot of reflections on it, but I'd say those are the only drawbacks. In terms of price, this isn't a premium segment computer, but in many ways it seems like it is. The touchpad is huge, responsive and precise, although some people might not like its placement. Sliding along its left edge adjusts the volume. The right edge is responsible for brightness. The top controls media, but it also serves to move the cursor in text documents, for example, when you want to correct a typo. The keyboard is pleasant, comfortable, and even has backlighting, although I wouldn't call it high quality, but well, it's better than nothing. The webcam for video calls has a resolution of 1080p, and the overall quality definitely meets expectations. The manufacturer also thought about allowing you to physically cover the camera lens. In such a thin device, I wouldn't even expect good-sounding speakers, but I once had a smartphone whose audio was tuned by Harman Kardon, and it sounded fantastic. Considering the class, size, and lightness of this laptop, it's really good, but of course, we can't compare it to external speakers. So far, everything's great, but now it's time for a bit of a downside. We need to address the problems related to the Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine architecture. A lot of smaller and larger programs already run natively on Snapdragons. Microsoft 365 Visual Audio, Adobe Photoshop, Express, and Lightroom are all essential. Even DaVinci Resolve and Blender don't require emulation either. On top of that, there are browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Brave, Vivaldi, and Opera, as well as a dozen of the biggest video streaming apps. If you use a specific program, it's worth checking out the Windows on ARM website. I'll leave the link in the description. You can check any application there and even a few games. They do say here that Age of Empires 2 doesn't work, but I personally have the definitive edition and it runs just fine, so don't treat this site as the ultimate authority. Think of it more as a guideline for what's natively supported and what might require emulation, meaning translation from the x86 architecture. Yes, if a program doesn't run natively on Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine and requires emulation, it's not an ideal situation. Translating between architectures requires additional computations. As a result, the application runs slower than on an x86 processor with the same performance, but the most important thing is that it works at all. Before I finished writing this text, I used the laptop for a month and basically everything I needed to do I was able to do on it, well, maybe with a few exceptions. We'll talk about gaming later, but when it comes to monitoring applications, although HWinfo has already released a version for Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine MicroStar International Afterburner still doesn't work. To display basic game stats, the built-in Windows game bar is enough. Press the Windows key plus G to activate it. The second issue involves handling video files. Of course, Snapdragon has hardware support for all popular formats, and there won't be any problems with any normal file. Here we see the new Deadpool streaming in 4K with high dynamic range looking nice and beautiful. We can see that hardware decoding on the graphics chip is being put to work. If a nearly 70GB movie like this works, then there's no need to worry about any other streaming. On Netflix and other platforms, you have a bitrate 10 times lower than in the program I'm using. If you want to know the instructions on how to access this application, they're available for those who support my channel. To join, check the link in the description. Now back to the topic. The issue occurs with professional video recordings. Here we can see how poorly the file recorded in 6K OpenGate vlog is being played back. It's really choppy and strange artifacts appear on the image. I tried not only the built-in system player, but also VLC, which is also made for Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine. And indeed, if we look at the specifications, there really is no hardware support for anything above 4K. I know not everyone will need this, but if someone is thinking about buying such a laptop just to preview or trim raw footage, it's a no-go and there's nothing you can do about it. This is absolutely not a hardware limitation, but rather a choice made by Qualcomm. For comparison, their older processor, Snapdragon 888 Gen 2, although weaker and actually meant for smartphones, can play back not just 6K, but as you can see, even 8K. This clip was also recorded using the same camera. This one is in 4K and the playback is definitely smooth. Here you might notice some stuttering because I was also using Windows screen capture at the same time, which caused a bit of stutter, but without recording it's perfectly smooth, which is of course great. Let's discuss games, beginning with 2 Point Hospital, which functions well. The game must be fully emulated from x86 like all the ones we'll examine today, but due to the fact that the resolution of this screen is crazy, almost 3K, and we have high settings here, this type of game is still fully comfortable even at around 30 frames per second. I have a huge soft spot for the first Dungeon Keeper, that's why the series called Dungeons drew me in so much. Here we see Dungeons 3 in the final stage of Dungeon expansion with medium settings after lowering the resolution by half. It may not be super smooth because the frame rate fluctuates between 30 and 40, but the gameplay is still possible. Doom Eternal worked once, but after switching weapons, the screen was filled with psychedelic triangles. After that, the game wouldn't start, leading me to conclude that the title is unplayable. To lift my spirits, Hades comes along, and oh, it looks gorgeous on the organic light-emitting diode screen. In a game like this, the 120Hz screen's smoothness is noticeable, with the frame rate ranging from 120 to 170 frames per second. GRID, 2 racing game initially launched in a window, and to even get to the settings in this game, you first have to finish the race. 30 to 40 frames per second isn't much, but you can finish the race. Cyberpunk 2077 on low settings, with ZSS support in performance mode, and the resolution dropped to 1366 by 761 looks terrible, but I think it runs even worse. The frames barely go above 20, but what's worse, the screen flickers black. On the other hand, Dying Light surprised me in a positive way. At the same resolution as Cyberpunk, the average frame rate hovers around 50 to 60. Of course, it depends on where you are and what's on the horizon, but it's fully playable. The frame rate rarely drops below 40. Of course, it's not a new title and the settings are low here as well, but the very fact that the game is totally unadapted to advanced reduced instruction set computer machine architecture and everything we see is being translated on the fly by the Snapdragon processor, well, in my opinion, that's worthy of admiration. Baldur's Gate 3 works too. I didn't really have time to devote myself to this title, but at the beginning of the gameplay, at a resolution of 2880 by 1620 pixels on medium settings with Fidelity FX Super Resolution support in ultra performance mode, during the gameplay itself we see around 25 to 50 frames per second. But like I said, at 3K resolution. Diablo 4 is an interesting case. I was able to play for several minutes, but after teleporting to one of the cities, I ended up with this error. With every subsequent game load, I received the same message. So I decided that the title was unplayable, but then a new game update appeared, I launched it and, well, it started working again. Will the problem happen again? Or maybe something has finally been fixed? Well, I don't know. For now, we can also forget about GTA 5. Sorry, I didn't have time for Manor Lords either, but in full screen resolution and on medium settings with Fidelity FX Super Resolution in balance mode, at least at the beginning of the map, Snapdragon holds between 20 and 30 frames. Age of Empires 2, Definitive Edition in full resolution with high settings we can play at just under 40 frames. But we won't be able to play 4. It throws an error saying the processor doesn't support advanced vector extensions instructions. For dessert, I left you The Witcher's third installment. I anticipated a complete failure. After all, on the previously tested gaming GPD, this game really struggled. Wow, on medium settings it's actually playable. How is that possible? Alright, maybe it's not 120 frames but a playable 40, and I'm still asking, how is that even possible? That's where a technology developed by Microsoft comes in, using artificial intelligence to improve visual quality and smoothness of games on computers with Snapdragon X series processors. AutoSR lowers the game's rendering resolution, here to 1366 by 768, and to boost the frame rate, it uses advanced artificial intelligence upscaling technology, and it's not a gimmick. So, when I open the performance monitor, we can see that the neural processor, yes, that dedicated separate unit on the Snapdragon responsible for artificial intelligence, is actually hard at work. The list of supported games, at least at the time of making this video, is quite short, but it should grow over time. It's a great thing when we can offload upscaling calculations to the neural processing unit, and although we can force this manually in almost any game, from what I've tried, it doesn't really make much sense. However, this technology deserves a separate video, so if you want to learn more, leave a comment. As you can see for yourselves, when buying a laptop like this, we really shouldn't expect it to be for gaming. Games that we might expect to work, like Age of Empires 4, sometimes won't even launch. Others crash, and games that we don't even expect to work actually run better than we might expect. The biggest advantage of devices with Snapdragon inside is their battery life. Tests show the Dell with Snapdragon lasted 23 hours, 11 minutes, but it's pricier, heavier, and has a smaller screen than the device tested here. The Vivobook S15 is equipped with a 70 watt-hour battery. The manufacturer states that the maximum battery life exceeds 18 hours, but in my tests, setting the screen to 50% and playing a 1080p clip on YouTube, the battery life did not exceed 14 hours. As I mentioned earlier, the screen is prone to reflections, so in a sunlit room it forces us to increase the brightness even up to 70 or sometimes 90, maybe even 100%. Then, even light office work that doesn't require much processing power can drain the battery in about 8 hours. Therefore, I conclude that the battery life is good, but not outstanding. The processor is indeed ultra energy efficient, but if you set the brightness high, use a light Windows theme and work on a white or gray background, then this 3K organic light emitting diode screen is what drains the battery the most. Time has passed and cloudy days have arrived, prompting this brief update. By keeping the screen brightness between 40 and 50%, the average battery life has noticeably increased, and now I can easily count on 13 to 15 hours of typical work in browsers. So the ASUS Vivobook S15 organic light emitting diode equipped with a Snapdragon processor is an excellent laptop for everyday work. Thanks to the excellent image quality and quite decent speakers, it's also great for multimedia. The processor's performance matches models with advanced micro devices or Intel processors, while also offering longer battery life combined with lower temperatures and noise levels. Yes, it has limitations for gaming, and only less graphically demanding titles can fully utilize the enjoyment of the 120Hz screen. So the month went by really quickly, and I can already say that daily tasks, at least except for that case with professional video files, didn't cause any problems at all. For a lightweight, long-lasting work laptop, consider a device with a Snapdragon processor if gaming isn't a priority. The description below contains a link to the full category of Qualcomm processor laptops.